Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the fourth webinar in the Insights Outreach series hosted by the DHS Science and Technology Office of Industry Partnerships. In this series, we want to help you navigate S&T's partnership opportunities, understand DHS mission needs, and identify paths to funding to help get the best Homeland Security solutions to market faster. And we invite you to join us the first Tuesday of every month for the webinar series. You can find a list of upcoming webinars on our DHS S&T events page. During today's webinar, you will learn about S&T's Cooperative Research and Development Agreements, or CRADAs. Please note today that if you have any questions or comments, be sure to put them in the Q&A chat box. With that, I will introduce Kalpana Reddy, the Chief of the DHS S&T Technology Transfer and Commercialization Branch. Kalpana, take it away.
Hi, Connie. Thank you for that introduction. Thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon to learn a little bit more about S&T and specifically our Cooperative Research and Development Agreement program. Today, we're going to be talking about the CRADA program, and our presentation is going to include a panel discussion moderated by our CRADA program manager, Patty Reichenbach. Patty is going to be joined today by two DHS program managers and their CRADA partners. They're going to be talking to you about their CRADA experience, the good and the bad. We've moved on to the next slide. So before we get into the CRADA discussion, I would like to take a couple of moments to talk to you a little bit about technology transfer at DHS. Within the Science and Technology Directorate and the Office of Industry Partnerships, that's the primary office charged with managing partnerships on behalf of the Directorate. These partnerships fall within two broad categories. The first is within the innovation branch, where those activities are designed to promote innovation and the development of technologies. And the second branch, the technology transfer and commercialization branch, is focused on developing partnerships that support the technology transfer and the commercialization of DHS relevant technologies. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the activities of the technology transfer and commercialization branch. Next slide, please. The technology transfer and commercialization program within S&T is focused on transferring DHS relevant technologies to external end users and the commercial marketplace. We manage a number of specialized tools and resources within the branch, and we have 5 primary program areas. The first, technology transfer and IP management, represents the traditional role of a technology transfer office, and we work with our Office of General Counsel to secure IP protection for DHS inventions and then manage the licensing and commercialization of those technologies. We have started to work with primary intermediaries under PIAs. These partners help DHS enhance our internal capabilities to locate partners to facilitate the transfer and commercialization of DHS technologies. That can be through locating manufacturing partners or potential licensees. A more recent initiative within the branch is the Homeland Security Startup Studio, where we're looking to identify federally funded DHS relevant technologies which can be spun out of a lab and capable of generating investment interest to ultimately commercialize technologies that can be made more widely available. We also have a focus on advancing and maturing technologies that DHS has supported through our Commercialization Accelerator program. This program serves to mature and advance technologies to increase the probability that they will be moved from the lab to the market. And then finally, our most important tool, and a tool that drives the majority of our partnerships within T2C, is our CRADA program. Cooperative Research and Development Agreements are well understood within the research community, and they allow DHS to partner with a wide range of non-federal entities to attack common research problems, to develop technologies, and also to test and evaluate technologies within an operational environment. Patty Reichenbach, our DHS CRADA program manager, will now provide you with more information on the CRADA program. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpana, for that introduction. Good afternoon. As the S&T Program Manager for the DHS CRADA program, I'd like to provide you with a brief overview of Cooperative Research and Development Agreements, or as we say, CRADAs. Based on the registration responses, 26% of you are familiar with CRADAs. So let's talk CRADAs a bit more to see if we can help the others know more about them. First off, CRADAs are legally binding agreements that facilitate collaborative research and development activities between a federal agency and non-federal partners. They allow the parties to exchange data and ideas while protecting intellectual property and proprietary information. Next slide. Potential collaborators for DHS CRADAs include the private sector companies, U.S. or foreign-based, U.S. state and local governments, academic institutions and universities, public and private foundations, nonprofit organizations, and even individuals. But it's important to note that DHS may not establish a CRADA with a foreign government at any level or a multinational organization such as NATO. Also, collaborative activities performed under CRADA can span the entire R&D lifecycle, from basic research and concept ideation to test and evaluation, pilot technology deployments, and product enhancements. Next slide. CRADAs are the ideal mechanisms for collaboration when DHS, one, has the resources and/or expertise not otherwise available to industry or outside parties that can be used to further the development of mission-critical technology. Two, when DHS needs the help of a private sector partner to develop an idea or technology to further its R&D mission. And three, when DHS needs a private sector partner to advance development of a technology or product to make it useful for consumers or the commercial market. Next slide. Our process slide shows the 5-step CRADA process and describes the actions taken by the CRADA program and the actions required by the DHS Program Office. Looking at the slide, I'd like to emphasize that the work performed under the CRADA must be collaborative in nature, meaning that both parties must contribute something to the collaboration and both parties must benefit from the collaboration. Also, CRADAs are neither a procurement contract nor a grant. It is nevertheless a legally enforceable agreement, and even though a non-federal partner can provide funding under an agreement, no funds are ever provided by the government to the non-federal party. Through these working relationships, CRADAs allow the federal side to understand the commercial needs and allow ideas from the commercial sector to flow into federal laboratories. Next slide. Wow. It looks like most of you are listening and got it right. All of the above is the correct answer. So next, let's see. Next, we're going to feature 2 cooperative research and development agreements with some interesting panelists doing interesting work for DHS. I'd like to introduce Kimberly Jones-Holt in the DHS S&T's First Responder and Detection Branch in the Office of Mission Capability and Support, and our collaborator, Doris Runa, Director, Higher Dimension Materials, with the highlighted fabric technology, which is super fabric made by HDM. They will be providing an insight into the work done under the Enhanced Rescue Hoist Glove collaboration. Alongside them is Dr. John Nealon. He is DHS S&T's Plum Island Animal Disease Center Director of Science working with Dr. Lisa Becton, who is the Director of Swine Health at the National Pork Board. Both Dr. Nealon and Dr. Becton will lead us in discussion on the inactivation of the African swine fever virus on porous and non-porous surfaces with commercial disinfectants. Good afternoon to each of you.
Good afternoon, Patty. I'm John Nealon. I am the Director of Science in Plum Island for DHS for Homeland Security. And Plum Island, it is a unique facility. It is the only facility in the United States to have the authority to conduct research, test and evaluation, experimental procedures with foreign animal diseases like foot and mouth disease. And it's one of the few that can also do similar experiments with African swine fever virus and classical swine fever virus. All these viruses are threats to the United States food industry today. Plum Island, it is operated by the Department of Homeland Security, and we USDA ARS, that's the research part of USDA, and their diagnostic section, that's the Animal Plant and Health Inspection Service. They are co-located on this facility. So what we have is we have research wings and we have the diagnostic wings of USDA in the same facility as Homeland Security. In 2004, Homeland Security set up a Targeted Advanced Development Group, and at that time, I became one of the first employees of that group. And that group was set up with the intention that it would accelerate the advancement of lead candidates in the countermeasure to foreign animal disease in the space. At that time, there were quite a lot of vaccine candidates and different platforms were being published for mouth disease virus, for instance, and they never reached any more than publication. The Homeland Security at the time, and the consortium, they came to the conclusion that we need to advance the development of one of these platforms. And at that time, adenovirus vector platform was the lead candidate, and that was discovered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, by American European Institute. So we, our first challenge was basically to test and evaluate that vaccine candidate and then drive it towards licensure. And in 2012, we managed to, in concert with the private sector, and quite a lot of funding to obtain the conditionally licensed virus vaccine that we use for emergency response. So since then, we moved on to look at other areas, and we've become more of a test bed for different products and innovations in the foreign animal disease space. Here in the last number of years, we've looked at not just vaccines alone, but we looked at the response to an incursion. So what happens if you have an incursion? You have to respond. Eventually, you're going to have to get back into business. And part of that is to decontaminate your facilities and dispose of carcasses if it's been a pretty horrific event. So we got into this disinfection space, and this is where we dovetail with the needs of the swine industry, which was brought to our attention by the National Pork Board, which Dr. Becton will tell you all about. So that's where we are. We provide a test bed for looking at for doing testing and evaluation of new innovations in foreign animal disease space, which would require our unique resources, such as our ability to work with foot and mouth disease and with African swine fever virus and classical swine fever virus. So that's where we are, and that's what we do. Over to you, Dr. Becton.
Thank you, John. Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Lisa Becton, and I work with the National Pork Board. Part of my responsibilities are really to oversee the research that impacts swine and swine health on behalf of our nation's producers. And so we always look very actively with other partners to do research, because while it'd be great to do research, we're more of the funding side. We have funds available through the Pork Act to be able to look at performing different research. And so we have a very active different working groups and task force that oversee really those funds and decide and come up with what are the priorities and how do we interact with other agencies and organizations to perform and fund research on their behalf. And so obviously within the last several years, African swine fever has been top of mind because of the impact potentially if it ever should reach our shores. And so we've been seeking out multiple partners to be able to work in this arena and address this very significant issue of how do we prevent and prepare for the event that one of these devastating diseases should ever reach the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those introductions and the information. This afternoon, we have a few questions that I'll be posing to the panelists. And let's start off with, why was a CRADA an effective mechanism for your collaboration? John, and then Lisa after.
Yes, we have been using CRADAs for, I guess, about 13 years or so. So we've got quite a lot of experience here. And we chose CRADAs because they give us an opportunity to reach out to industry and at a let's call it a local level, in that you're not going through a major contract like we would have with funding. And you can look at new innovations and be able to determine fairly quickly whether or not you can then move them forward to see if you can fund them to go towards development. So it gives you an introduction to industry, more or less, into what they need or what they do. In many cases, the industry comes to us and they have a new technique or a new tool, and they want to test it for African swine fever virus or for mouth disease. And we're the only people that have the authority to be able to do that. So we are able to learn whether those technologies are going to be part of the countermeasure toolbox eventually, and we get an opportunity to look at those and to put them through the tests. So and that's all done without any government funds being passed to a third party. So we get in on the cheap, so to speak. But at the same time, we have to commit the resources, and that's why we use CRADA to give us those authority to commit government resources to do this type of work. You can't just go ahead and say, oh, I like that project, let's go ahead and we can do this without going through some authorities, but we have to get the authorities to use the taxpayers' funds. So I like CRADAs for that reason. We can get in quick, you can get them CRADA executed in less than 3 months and get working, and that's fast. A contract, depending on budgets, funding, and go through all the other processes, it could take 1.5 years sometimes. So sometimes, opportunity is very important, so we can't lose opportunities. And this provides you those opportunities to be able to take advantage of new innovations that are coming out there. That's why I like CRADAs. Okay.
Thanks. This is our first time as an organization of the Pork Board utilizing the CRADA, but it's been a very effective tool. We work with many other different agencies and organizations and are used to different contract formats. And John hit the nail on the head, being able to look at something that's very responsive and rapid to one, get the agreement going, and then two, get the research going, because producers most of the time would love to have answers to their critical questions yesterday, but knowing that working with organizations that are very flexible, efficient, and rapid in getting things initiated and going has been a very big benefit for us. And so, like I said, so far, we've been very, very happy and think we have a very successful agreement ongoing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, how did DHS and the National Pork Board find each other? John?
I like to say serendipitously, but a number of years back, we were asked to get involved in looking at the decontamination of machinery, of trucks, trucks are used in the rendering industry, and to look at the decontamination of those. And this was our first time getting into this space. And at that time, U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Agriculture Service, or Research Service, they had an SME as Dr. Crew. He was doing some work, I think he was performed by the Pork Board too, or by the processing plant folk, to look at different disinfectants and decontaminants. Again, it was the African swine fever virus question. And so we leveraged a lot from him, and eventually he moved on to other research areas. And then the Pork Board came back, and they had a gap that was identified by them and by the industry. And they reached out to USDA again, and they were told, well, the Homeland Security are doing this work now, so maybe you might want to talk to them. And that's how we got the conversation going, and it's been very fruitful ever since. So it's you, Lisa.
Yes, thanks. It's right. Serendipitous is the truth. You know, the key thing is that we look at where can we get this type of research done. Whenever you're looking and assessing foreign animal disease research in the United States, there's currently two places to perform that, both at the Plum Island facility or at the BRI facility in Kansas. Now, there is other facilities in Winnipeg and then others on foreign soil, but really to be able to address some of the U.S. specific incidents, there's only two places. And Dr. Nealon's correct. We had reached out to USDA because we had done some research with them back in 2012 on disinfectants and wanted to expand that since we had had new products since that time. And so USDA had referred us to DHS staff, and we set up the initial call to discuss kind of what our concept was from the producers, and it started the ball rolling. And so with Dr. Nealon and his staff, including Lindsay Gabbert, we really got to hone in and ratchet in on what were the needs of the disinfectant research and meet those needs pretty rapidly.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving along to our next question. What was the outcome of this CRADA activity, John?
The paperwork was done pretty quickly, and the experiment started right away. We were able to define which disinfectants were the most effective, and they've been moved forward. And again, Lindsay Gabbert of my team has been the driver behind all of this. She takes the lead from me, so I get all the credit for what she's done. But basically, she has been working. She has conducted experiments, and these reports have been presented. And as a result of these, the labor claims are being sought for some of these products, so to say that they can be used to inactivate airborne swine fever virus. Because basically, disinfectant can only say what it can do on the label, and has to be shown to be able to do that. So without having the experiments done with, say, airborne swine fever virus or for the mountain disease, for instance, so you can't make that claim. So they've been able to do that. And what happens there is that becomes another piece can go into the veterinary stockpile to be able to counteract an incursion disease. So this has been a win-win for us, because basically our mission is to come along to conduct experiments on potential countermeasures that go into the veterinary stockpile. So it's been a win-win for us. And the nice thing is that when the report came to us, they came to us with a final list of disinfectants that were used by the industry. So nothing new, nothing novel, nothing that's under investigation elsewhere. This is what the industry is used to, this is what they use. So therefore, there's little of a learning curve for them in the event that there is an outbreak, and they can use the same disinfectants, the same dilutions, the same way as they usually do. So basically, we're able to get that, check those boxes, and that's important for down the line if we ever have to do it. So it's been a win-win for us in that. Thank you, Lisa.
I think this has been a win-win for the industry as well, because just like Dr. Nealon said, that we were testing out the products that producers normally use on farm, and over and above the scientific evaluation and review of those products really came the relationship building and the trust, because out of this CRADA, we still have ongoing discussions about new and additional work, different concepts and ideas. And so in addition to validation of the science of the disinfectants and whether or not they address a pathogen, I think an even bigger outcome came that contact information for us as Pork Board, to have the resources within DHS to know who we can go and help us address, be the expertise, but then also address some of these very, complicated issues. The disinfection, it's a little bit more involved than it sounds, but then some of the other things that are going on within industry to address foreign animal diseases, having that resource for us has been invaluable. And we look forward to that ongoing relationship and work together here in the future.
Great, thank you. Okay, could you both elaborate on your experience working through the CRADA process? What your thoughts are on that? John?
Well, after 13 years working on CRADAs and putting together the paperwork for CRADAs and going through the evolution of the templates, at this point we are very adept at getting them done and getting them quickly. We to go through the process pretty much. We reach out, say, to partner A, and they've got the process that we're interested in, and they want to use our test bed. So we'll have a conversation with them just at a very high level. No IP, no proprietary exchange, but get a sense of what they can do. Then we make a determination, can we do a CRADA? So from there on in, we pass over the boilerplate for their legal people to look at, see if there's anything there to give them an opinion. And normally it's to work out very quickly if there is some, because usually it's nothing much. And then we get to work. And within a very short period, we have the documents all filled out, the statements of work, and what the expectations are from each party. And it can be done very quickly. So it has evolved from the first one to where we are now. And I think it's very efficient and very effective paperwork. It's not just building more paperwork and building in more regulations and making things more difficult. It's pretty straightforward. So that's where I stand on it. Lisa, what are your thoughts?
You know, since this was the first time that we have utilized the CRADA, I would say, even though I'm not the grants administrator, if ever it is, but it was a relatively smooth process. Like I said, we've worked with a bunch of different organizations, from USDA to universities to companies to individuals as well. And so we do have different contract formats. But I would say for the most part, it really was a very smooth transition process. I think the only thing that gave us a little bit of a hiccup was the actual payment system, because with our accounting sometimes is a little bit different. We have to go on a calendar year. But honestly, those were hiccups. They weren't major issues. We worked very diligently through those, and we're still continuing to use the CRADA today, and I hope we can in the future.
That's very positive. Thank you both. Okay, Lisa, we'd like to have you give us some thoughts on the last question. Based on this experience, would you do another CRADA with DHS?
I think that answer is a definite yes. Obviously, our producers are always looking at what are the next threats on the horizon. African swine fever is still a significant threat, as are other foreign animal diseases. And so that challenge, I don't think, will ever go away. And so because of the success of this CRADA, I think that's already led to a lot of continued discussion, thought generation about what's the next project, what are the next areas that we need to investigate. And so long story short, I'd say yes, that we would definitely seek out to work together again.
That's great news. As a CRADA program manager, all these are making me feel good. Okay, John and Lisa, thank you so much for your interesting perspectives. And next, we'll have Kimberly and Doris on the HDM and DHS collaboration. Could you also give us a brief introduction to each of your areas of expertise, please?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Jones-Holt, and I'm one of the program managers within the Office of Mission and Capability Support. Most of the projects that are within my portfolio fall under the category of personal protective equipment, and that's primarily for the first responder community. So when you think of first responders, think of law enforcement, structural and wildland firefighters, as well as emergency medical service personnel. I help to provide personal protective gear for all of those individuals based on identified capability gaps from first responders. We work with over 130 first responders from various state, local, and tribal communities that provide that information so that we can get them the technology that they so desire. Doris?
Hi, my name is Doris Rona, and I am a director at HDM, and we are the inventors and manufacturers of Super Fabric. It is a high-performance technical fabric that allows for a fabric to have increased abrasion resistance, cut resistance, stain resistance, etc. It just makes a normal fabric into an enhanced fabric. My background is that I have been with HDM Superfabric for 9 years. And as director, I am heavily involved with product development, but through client companies that come to us and ask for suggestions. Prior to that, I spent 10 years with another company doing additional product development. And prior to that, I was with IFAI, which is Industrial Fabrics Association International. And I dealt with standards development within transportation and PPE products. So that background hopefully suited me for the challenge that was presented.
Thank you. Thank you both. We'll follow the same questions to Kimberly and Doris. And first, why is CRADA an effective mechanism for your collaboration? Kimberly?
Sure. So the CRADA worked out very well for us in allowing us to collaborate directly with Higher Dimensions Material in the development of the Enhanced Rescue Hoist Glove. Several first responders had came to us from around the country, to include San Diego Fire and Rescue, as well as the North Carolina National Guard, and one of our DHS components, the United States Coast Guard, identifying a technology or a capability gap as far as the rescue hoist gloves were concerned. And the slide presentation that was just shown to you on the right-hand side showed some of those wear indicators that would occur with the current rescue hoist gloves on market. And by utilizing the CRADA, we were able to establish a direct collaborative relationship, not just with HDM as our partnering manufacturer of the glove, but with our collaborators to do an assessment of the overall glove to help them to get a better performing glove that would give them increased flexibility and dexterity.
Thank you, Doris.
For Kimberly said everything so well. I'll see what I can add. What was interesting, and when you look at these pictures, the concept is that a rescue hoist glove is a very much of a niche area, but it is extremely, extremely important. To give you some idea, that cable that the rescuers, the first responders use is about the thickness of a pencil. And it slides through gloves at a variety of speeds. On the right-hand side, you see a used glove, and this is one of the reasons the program was developed. That used glove was torn into shreds, basically, via 1 or 2 rescues. And the other issue is that leather fibers embedded into the cable, which can destroy the cable. And also heat transfer is an issue. So thus, this is a niche as noted, but a very important niche. The CRADA overall, as Kimberly noted, we had 3 rescue groups, and it was instrumental to helping us do the final fine-tuning and design of the rescue gloves. Having their input, informing what they needed, what changes, were instrumental to the final development, because we listened and we found by listening and incorporating their ideas that were extremely positive with that information. But without the CRADA, we would not have their firsthand expertise.
Great, thank you. Very interesting. Next, how did DHS and HDM find each other? Kimberly?
So previously, the First Responders Resource Group, in collaboration with DHS S&T, used to hold what was called an Industry Day. And that was an opportunity for the public and private sector partners to meet up, not only with DHS S&T program managers, but also with people from our budget and contract office, for them to learn the various different contract vehicles available to the public and private sector, either through the broad agency announcement, also known as BAAs, or through the Small Business Innovative Research, also known as SBIRs, and speak with contract personnel that knew specifically about these vehicles and how public and private sector could go about applying to these various opportunities. So there's a lot of discussion that goes on between program managers and first responders and public and private sectors during Industry Day. And it was during a conversation at Industry Day that Doris will elaborate further on that we had the opportunity to discuss this particular capability gap and what technology may exist out there that could actually fit that gap. Doris?
Kimberly, again, is right. There was a DHS pre-solicitation or Industry Day, and an associate who is from North Carolina State University was there at the Industry Day and heard and was in meetings with the first responders, noting, as you saw on the previous slide, that used glove and their needs and the issues with current gloves. And the associate thought, they needed an enhanced material that wouldn't shed. So he got in contact with me and informed me of what he had learned from that Industry Day. And the discussion with him and then additional discussions with DHS program managers led us to this program.
Great, thank you. You've touched on some of this a little bit, but what was the outcome of this CRADA activity? Kimberly?
So as mentioned previously, we work directly with first responders that identify what that technology gap may be. And we then solicit through various contract vehicles to find a project performer that will be able to meet those requirements and provide us the technology that those first responders so desire. The CRADA was a great collaborative tool to allow us to do that, because once that technology was developed, that prototype, we were able to utilize the CRADA as a vehicle to get this technology into the hands of the first responders. And so there were specific requirements that we asked of them in terms for them evaluating this particular glove, is to use it in a manner in which it was designed to be used, and all of that stipulated in the CRADA, because as Patty mentioned previously, it is an enforceable agreement. And to do this over a period of time, be it 18 to 24 months, and then ultimately to provide feedback directly to the product manufacturer, which is HDM, so that they could go in and gather that feedback and assimilate that feedback in such a way that they would design the glove that would be well used by the first responder, filling all of those capability gaps, and then be ready for ultimate commercialization.
With the outcome of the CRADA, yes, it was extremely important and extremely beneficial. As Kimberly noted, and we talked about prior, to have that interaction with first responders is instrumental to identifying what the issues are, identifying any fine tuning that they may wish, to have different small but really significant design changes that fit their needs. As you saw on the prior slide, small aspects such as a black glove is hard to find, so we used an orange color so they can find it into their bag. The cuff, the fit, the feel, all that information and all that feedback from real rescue experiences and also training was instrumental to get that final design.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, next, if you could tell us, what was your experience working through the CRADA process? Kimberly?
Sure. So I've utilized the CRADA process before, but I will say that that CRADA process is relatively seamless. The staff within the CRADA office are very helpful. They provide templates that will assure that all of your work is standardized, so you don't have to worry about CRADA 1 looks one way and CRADA 2 looks somewhat different. It's standardized templates that you're using. If there are any questions, there are websites that are available to help you, as well as personnel are always available to speak to you if you have, or meet with you if you have any questions. So you're never out there doing it all alone. It's always a collaborative session between you and whoever you're working with within the CRADA office. So as Doris mentioned previously, it is very beneficial. I would definitely use the process again. It also helps to ensure that that first responder is using that product exactly in the manner in which you desire it to be used. Very efficient and effective.
For me, the experience, some of the key words, very positive, a smooth process. And I'd like to thank Kimberly and Emily for a lot of hand-holding, because this is the first time we have gone through a CRADA process. But as Kimberly noted, there are templates and just hand-holding instructions saying, this is the next step, then this, and it went really smooth. So don't be afraid of it, is I guess the bottom line to that. With the experience of the CRADA, I'd noted beneficial, positive. The contacts and the feedback from these 3 groups, and more than that, you know, a variety of Coast Guard, the North Carolina National Guard, the San Diego Search and Rescue, their contacts, their feedback has been so positive. And the other interesting thing, and Kimberly noted, is aware of this, is that they came up with some ideas saying, hey, you know, can you make another one that just does this? Does, you know, and something of that nature. So we'll see. But overall, I would like to comment, and one of the, from an experience basis, is that to hear uplifting comments from the first responders who did the testing, again, both in real world rescues and in training, they were very positive and appreciative of listening and asking them what they need versus saying, this is what we think you need. Because they're in the field, they know that, they're willing to share their comments and their feedback. But again, it was uplifting and very positive to hear from them. Thank you for listening and incorporating our ideas, because this is what we need. Sometimes they get equipment that is, as one person said, is developed in a closet and doesn't suit their needs. So that was, again, very positive.
Well, all good points. Thank you. Dara says, I've asked Lisa, based on his experience, would you do another CRADA with DHS?
Yes, and yes. Again, I'll repeat that. It was positive, it was smooth, it was beneficial. To get feedback from these groups, from the actual users, and them sharing their ideas with you is so beneficial. I would heartily recommend it to anyone. And as noted before, this is our first CRADA. It can be scary, but don't worry, it's very smooth and very beneficial. DHS staff is there for you all along the road.
Thank you. We pride ourselves in trying to help everyone out as much as we can. So it's open to discussions and conversations. Okay, the next slide, is that the CRADA resource slide? There we go. I'd like to thank all the participants today, especially our panelists. By definition, tech transfer requires a partnership, and the success is finding the right partner. That's easier said than done during the best of times, but during a pandemic, it's an even bigger challenge. So please use the CRADA fact sheet and the DHS S&T CRADA website to learn more about working with DHS. Next slide. This slide is our contact information. We look forward to working with you. And I believe Connie's going to go into the questions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Patty. So we have a number of questions that have come up through the chat here. So let me just go ahead and pull this first one up. So, so the first question is, how do I know when a DHS CRADA opportunity is available?
Okay, good. DHS may choose to advertise a CRADA opportunity when interested parties are unknown, or if the technology or project is such that competition is in the best interest of the government and the public. But there are many times that the potential collaborators may contact DHS for help, and that can be done as on our contact page at the S&T Innovation email box, which is, like I just said, on our contact page.
Okay, great. And then the next question that we have is, how does DHS identify technologies or partners to collaborate with using the CRADA vehicle?
Okay, as I mentioned, DHS could advertise an opportunity, or if you think you have technology that would be beneficial to DHS, please contact the innovation inbox in our contact on our contact page, and or write to us, and we'll get you into the right people.
Okay. All right. And then another question that I have is, and this one came in, I hope that I asked this right. Can a CRADA be used for prototype development?
Yes, definitely. The whole life cycle, all of R&D life cycle can be done under a CRADA because it's collaborative.
Okay. All right. And then another question that we had is, how do you transition to program of record or an operational program? I think that that's coming from a CRADA.
Could you say that again?
That actually may be one of those questions that we want to take offline. I'm actually going to skip down to another question that we received. Can all component agencies and organizations within DHS use CRADAs to partner with industry?
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. And then we have another question that's come in. So what level of effort or resources in terms of FTEs does DHS usually commit to execute the terms of a CRADA?
Well, speaking from the CRADA program side of things, in executing the terms, we work with our DHS legal counsel and the collaborators to negotiate terms that protect DHS interest and the IP and proprietary information of our CRADA partners. And when implementing the statement of work, how about we ask the program managers, Kimberly and John, what their thoughts are?
Great.
I'll take a stab here. Basically, what CRADAs that we've been involved in, when we start looking at statement of work, we have to make sure that we have the staff and the resources available. So we have to be very careful with the anti-deficiency rule. We can't promise what we can't deliver. So we have to be very careful there. But normally what it takes is a higher level scientist as a leader, probably in about 20% of their time. And then they'll have support staff, then we contract staff at maybe up to 50% of the time over the period of the CRADA. Now that can move, the needle can move back and forth by maybe 50%, because basically different CRADAs will require sometimes more manpower at the bench, sometimes more cranial power in managing. So it can work both ways there. But if you were to try to put it in terms of dollar amounts, some of the things that we do, I would put it up in maybe to $200,000 to $300,000 in resources when it's all put together over a 3-year to 4-year period. It could run into that. So that's in terms of finance. So the government do put a good lot of resource into these, and so it's not just a one-way street. But again, at the same time, they are very productive. So it's I think that's the best answer I can give at this point.
Kimberly, do you have anything to add?
I'm sorry, Patty, could you repeat the question again? I didn't hear the first part.
Connie, can you repeat the question, please?
My apologies.
Absolutely. No worries. So what level of effort or resource in terms of FTEs, so full-time employees, does DHS usually commit to execute the terms of a CRADA?
So from the program manager point of view, making sure that our first responder community has an opportunity to assess the technology is critical in the R&D life cycle. So normally we actually start preparing for the CRADA probably midway through that project. So normally our method of operation is that we actually have an operational field assessment where we actually have first responders. Well, due to COVID, we actually haven't had them come on site or at a particular venue, but we've been hosting those virtually. So that's their first introduction to working with the technology, assessing it in scenarios similar to what that technology would be used in. That's around the same point of time that we're creating that CRADA, because we've already identified potential partners to work with as far as doing future assessment of the CRADA. And I would say, since the template is already there for us, I would say at that point, maybe the CRADA would require 20 to 30% of our time, because normally we're entering into a CRADA agreement with each project performer. So it's customized to that particular project performer or collaborator rather, as opposed to project performer. So I would say maybe 20 to 30% of the project lifecycle is spent on doing CRADAs, but it's a very worthwhile effort. And once you've done it a couple of times, it becomes pretty standard.
Thank you. And I guess you'll both agree that it depends on the project, as how, some are more involved than others that would take more time and effort and resources if needed. So thank you.
That is true. That is true, Patty. That's a good point. So when it's a widget that we're looking at putting in the hands of the project performer, it may be a little bit different than if it's an app that's going to be on like a mobile device. We recently had a CRADA that we entered into for a mobile application. So that was a little bit different. In fact, it was a little bit of a lighter lift than actually putting a widget in the hands of a first responder. It just required some creative thinking, but the CRADA office was right there with us to help us along those lines. And if we ran into any legal issues, they would quickly get the Office of General Counsel involved so we could head off any issues very quickly and easily.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yes, Kimberly, I think you said a worthwhile endeavor, and certainly I think that those are the appropriate words for that. So Patty, we do have one more question. This is actually a clarification from the question that was we had previously asked. But the question is, how do you go from a CRADA to production? So how does the government become a customer after the research is done?
Kalpana, can you answer that question? Are you going to commercialization after the CRADA?
I believe so. That is always yes. So I guess this is in reference to what one of the previous presenters was talking about in terms of that the CRADA with the gloves. So how does the glove company now sell the gloves that they developed? So I think it does have to do with the commercialization aspect. That is something that we can always ask offline, Patty, if it would be better answered offline.
Well, if Kalpana is still involved, I don't know whether she lost contact or not. She could probably help talk about that.
Okay, I actually think we're having some technical difficulties, so we will actually clear that up in an email. We will clear that up in an email later. Thank you for the question, though. I think that is actually just one last question, and I think that even maybe I'll be able to answer this. So is there a specific website available to review CRADA opportunities? Patty, I don't know. I know that we have our work with S&T website, which I think that we can put into the chat in just a minute here. So that's actually a place where you can go and you can look for all of the current opportunities. There will be a list of current opportunities. So we'll get that, and then we'll put that website into the chat in just a second here. But that looks like all of the questions we have for today. Patty, do you have any follow-up thoughts, final thoughts?
Well, I wanted to say that I think some of the registers came in with timeframes for establishing a CRADA. So I kind of want to just go over that a little bit. Overall, if once you work out with the program and a collaborator get in contact with each other and start working on a CRADA, once my office gets it, we expect 1 to 2 weeks for the CRADA program reviews, and it includes back and forth with the DHS program. Many times the process is lengthened when working with the collaborators, trying to get clarification and interpretation on issues they may identify. We need to allow another 2 to 4 weeks to engage with our Office of General Counsel on the legal review, depending on the issues. But it's good to note here that DHS Legal Counsel has developed the legal articles in the agreement, and they should not be changed. We run into some issues with the collaborators' legal teams a lot of times wanting to put their mark on the legal terms. If a specific CRADA activity requires modifications to the legal terms and conditions, we will work with the program and OGC to incorporate those changes in the statement of work. But I know there were a few questions on that came in earlier, so I just wanted to touch on that. As far as final words from me, I'd like to reemphasize that CRADAs are legally binding agreements that allow the parties to exchange data and ideas while protecting intellectual property and proprietary information. They can span the entire R&D lifecycle and must be collaborative in nature. That's meaning that both parties must contribute something and most must benefit from the collaboration. So I think this has been a great webinar with interesting information and questions. I again thank everyone for joining, especially the panelists, and it was a pleasure being with you today. Have a great day.
Okay, thanks, Patty. And then I think that we have another slide here. Yes, absolutely. That is our next Insights Outreach webinar that will be taking place on Tuesday, June 1st. We want to invite everybody to that next webinar. You will actually be hearing about the Silicon Valley Innovation Program. We have our startup spotlights. So during that webinar, you will learn how DHS S&T harnesses emerging technologies from the startup community for homeland security use. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, both the attendees and those presenters in the webinar, Kimberly, Lisa, Doris, Patty, Kalpana, and John. I know that we had a full house and that we had a lot of questions. So if we weren't able to get to your question, I know there were a couple of questions we weren't able to get to, so please send us an email. We will clarify those in a follow-up email. Also for all of you fans out there, may the 4th be with you. So little joke there, but all right, hope to see everybody at the next Insights Outreach webinar. Bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.